There we go.
All rise, come to order. The 4:33 report is now in session. Honorable David Miscavige presiding.
Everybody can be seated. Okay, this is cause number C 2013-1082B. We're here today in convening a temporary injunction hearing, and I'm going to begin by having just some opening statements and or presentations, and then take a little bit of evidence today. The media is welcome during this opening phase and period of the trial, but so as to preserve the integrity of the process. As far as any witnesses and testimony, at a certain point when we get down the road here, I'm going to ask that all recording devices be removed from the courtroom and the third floor when we begin the testimony. But at the outset, you're certainly welcome. I want to give everybody a fair opportunity and just balance all the interests concerned. But at this time, Mr. Jeffrey, just by way of opening.
Excuse me, Your Honor, may I speak briefly? George Spencer, one of the counsel for defendant Church of Scientology International. Your Honor, I understand you have set the hearing on our motion to disqualify for 9 a.m. tomorrow. Is that
yes, sir.
Your Honor, we respectfully object to this proceeding going forward before that motion to disqualify has been determined, and object to this temporary injunction being until the motion to disqualify is determined.
Again, trying to balance a lot of different issues. I respectfully that's denied or overruled. Yes, sir.
I'm ready to proceed, Your Honor.
You may.
Okay. Your Honor, my name is Ray Jeffrey, and Elliot Capuccio and Mark Wiegand and I represent this lady who's sitting right here. Her name is Monique Rathbun. She's sitting next to her husband, Mark Rathbun, who's also known as Marty Rathbun. This case is about the intentional, premeditated harassment carried out by the defendants against the plaintiff, Monique Rathbun. The lawsuit is just beginning, but the court, as you know, is already having to confront a couple of issues. Normally, the court doesn't have to get too involved until we get a little bit farther down the road. But there are a couple of issues that the court will be facing. One, should the temporary restraining order that is protecting Mrs. Rathbun, should that be extended into a temporary injunction? And two, are these defendants subject to jurisdiction here in Texas? We believe the unequivocal answer to both of these questions is yes. Mrs. Rathbun deserves continued injunctive protection against these defendants, and the defendants should be made to answer these charges here in Texas. The relevant evidence in the case will be serious, both as to the ordeal suffered by Mrs. Rathbun as well as the culpability of the defendants. Here's what the evidence will establish. For more than 3 years, the defendants have shattered the privacy and the tranquility of Mrs. Rathbun's life. She has endured a complete loss of privacy, nonstop surveillance, videoing, photographing, face-to-face actual confrontations, intimidation, insults, harassment of her family, her friends, her co-workers, humiliating, nasty pranks, if you want to call them that. I think they're actually worse, but I can't think of another word. And finally, an interference with hers and her husband's ability to make a living. All of this has gone on for more than 3 years. Well, at the end of last year, Mrs. Rathbun really reached the breaking point. The defendants had made her life unbearable at her own home down in the Texas coast. Before the harassment started, she and her husband had lived a happy waterfront lifestyle down in Ingleside on the Bay, near Corpus Christi. They had to give that up. At the end of last year, they moved up here to Comal County to a house in the Rimrock Ranch subdivision over just off of 1863 in Bulverde. The house seemed ideal. It was set back off of the road on some acreage. It was hidden by trees. They had good, solid neighbors on each side. In fact, the neighbor on one side is the landlord leasing them the house that they have leased. Behind them is dense, unoccupied. So they missed Ingleside on the Bay, but they appreciated what they had found up here in Comal County. They breathed a sigh of relief. They enjoyed the tranquility here. They were still followed sometimes. There were still private eyes or other agents of the defendants that they could see lurking around. But at least they felt secure in the privacy of their new home. That was until very recently when a stranger, a suspicious stranger, showed up on the property behind them. That was the defendant, Steve Sloat. He was calling himself Greg Sloat. He's a former deputy U.S. Marshal. And he gave a story about leasing the property behind their house to put an RV on. The details of the story really kind of stunk to high heaven. The Rathbuns, after what they've been through for over 3 years, were pretty suspicious. Then, just maybe a month or so ago, they discovered on this wooded property behind them a high-tech, camouflaged, human surveillance camera. The camera was pointed directly at their home and at the driveway. They have a long caliche drive, you'll see, coming into their home. So not only would they be surveilled, but people who came to see them would be surveilled. The camera, as I said, is high-tech, set up to transmit images over the cellular system. It's a camera designed for law enforcement use, not something used by deer hunters or people interested in game management. When that happened, Your Honor, Mrs. Rathbun was absolutely distraught. It finally came crashing down on her. They could run, but they couldn't hide. So we're here today because as fearful as Mrs. Rathbun is of these defendants, she realizes that her only choice, the only option, is to stand and fight. That's why we sought the TRO, and that's why we're seeking a continuation of the injunctive protection into a temporary injunction. And I'll remind the court, we've got all these defendants and their forces here. All the court has ordered them to do is not harass her and follow her and surveil her. That's why we're here. So we brought a suit for injunctive relief to make this abuse stop, for actual damages to compensate her, and for punitive damages to deter them from doing this conduct in the future, and to set an example that this kind of behavior will not be tolerated here in Comal County, Texas. One point I would like to make to the court is this is not a religious case, even though it involves these corporations that are all part and parcel of this Church of Scientology, and you'll get to learn a little bit about that in the case. But it's not a religious case. Mrs. Rathbun has never, ever been a member of the Church of Scientology. We're not here about their theology or their beliefs. They can believe whatever they want to believe. That the court is not going to be called on to make any determinations about any of that kind of stuff. This case is about a powerful organization and its duty to behave lawfully in a civil society. It's also about the rights of a law-abiding Texas citizen to live in peace. I would be surprised if any of these lawyers got up and quibbled about that people have a right to be left in peace and that a corporation has an obligation to behave lawfully in a civil society. I don't anticipate that's what the battleground will be. I do expect them to fight like crazy to deny involvement in all of this bad behavior. I think that will be the battleground of this case. Who is behind this organized campaign of harassment of this nice lady? We will prove that one person is behind it. A man named David Miscavige, who is the self-proclaimed Pope of Scientology. Mr. Miscavige used, the evidence will show, the other defendants as co-conspirators to carry out his plan. I need to summarize what the evidence will be in this regard. What will be proved? To untangle any legal dispute that relates to these defendant corporations can be bewildering, and I urge the court not to underestimate this. The evidence will show that corporate Scientology's confusing complexity is not accidental. It is deliberate, and they have spent vast amounts of time and treasure to construct it. They have designed the corporate structure and all of these legal formalities for one purpose: to shield Scientology and Scientologists from criminal and civil liability. Scientology's founder, L. Ron Hubbard, not speaking about the faith or anything like that, but speaking about the practicalities of the corporations, described their corporate legal structure quite proudly as quicksand. He also said, and I'll quote, "Every time they shoot at you on the right side of the horse, you're on the left side. And then they prove conclusively you're on the left side of the horse, and you prove conclusively that you're on the right side of the horse." They go mad after a while. This is what the basic legal structure is.